Okay, we were talking yesterday about the different minhagim of Avelos, and you'll notice that a majority of the minhagim treat Lag BaOmer as a special day. One minhag does not. One minhag says you got to have 33 full days of Avelos, and the Svira restrictions are only permitted after Lag BaOmer. But most opinions, even if you do 49 days, they do have Lag BaOmer as a break in the middle. And this is Lag BaOmer in the daytime, not Lag BaOmer at night. Let me just mention that there is a special Kallah in Halacha when Lag BaOmer is on Sunday, as it is this year. When Lag BaOmer is on Sunday, because it is so adjacent to Shabbos, so we allow you to cut your hair on Friday in honor of the combination of Lag BaOmer and Shabbos. This will be a heter that will apply only Friday morning or Friday in the day. It does not apply to Thursday night. And it is only a heter for haircuts and shaving. It is not a heter for music. And it is not a heter to get married. If you wanted to get married on Friday, you would not be allowed to do that. Yeah.
So is this something that people in Israel tend to do?
Many people. I mean, get a haircut on Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know.
Would I stand out if I did it?
If you did it or didn't do it?
Did do it.
No.
Okay.
I'm actually not planning on getting a haircut either. So so it's not. So you're not going to be marked as an apikoros or something. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Is this heter, does it only apply to Ashkenazim or Sephardim as well?
No, Sephardim as well. It's a general heter. Yeah. So okay. So I want to talk today is what is special about
Sephardim as well, even though we hold you can't shave until Ramadan.
No, that's a good point. Meaning, if you don't, that's correct. No, you're correct. The problem is that there is a machlokas among Sephardim if they keep Lag BaOmer. If they keep Lag BaOmer, they would have this heter. But like the minhag of the Mechaber, that there is no Lag BaOmer at all, then there would be no heter for this. That's correct. But like the Sephardim who do cut their hair on Lag BaOmer, they could do it on Friday as well. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about what is special about Lag BaOmer. What is, 33rd day of the Omer, so what? What is significant about it? So the first thing I want to talk about is the connection to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. So who is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who is often called Rashbi? That's the abbreviation, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. So first of all, it's interesting. On one hand, Rabbi Akiva lost 24,000 Talmidim. Tremendous tragedy. But after he lost 24,000 Talmidim, he had the courage to start again. And he had 5 Talmidim, 5 people. Now you might figure, a person might, think, what's the purpose of this? I had 24,000, I lost them. I should start with 5, but he started with 5. In fact, he may have ended with 5. It didn't necessarily get any bigger. But among the 5 Talmidim that he was able to ordain was the great Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who was the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. In fact, it's interesting. It's almost that he has different identities, because the Mishnah often mentions Rabbi Shimon. And although there's more than one Rabbi Shimon, but often the Rabbi Shimon it's talking about is Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, even though he's not mentioned as bar Yochai. He's just mentioned as Rabbi Shimon. So he actually is around quite a lot, even though you don't necessarily know that he is the one that we are talking about. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon were Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva on the second round of the 5. Now, we know that Rav Shimon bar Yochai was obviously a very great Talmid of Rabbi Akiva. In fact, Rabbi Akiva once said that you are among the Bnei Aliyah. And Rav Shimon bar Yochai was once very sad because people didn't appreciate him, people didn't understand him. And Rabbi Akiva said, it's enough that I and your Creator know who you are. Right? So even if Shimon bar Yochai had insecurities and needed positive affirmation. So what is the shaychus of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and Lag BaOmer? So there's a tradition that many Sfarim record that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai died on Lag BaOmer. He was in Tzfat. He died on Lag BaOmer. And the day that he died became a day of rejoicing. It is called Hilula. Hilula is celebration of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So the obvious question is, why would the day of his death be rejoicing? Lehepech, the day that a tzaddik dies, Yarchei, is a day of sadness. So the Sfarim explain, because the day that he died, right before his death, he revealed to the world the deep mystical secrets of Kabbalah that were then written down in the Zohar. The Zohar, which is kind of the main book of Kabbalah, right? Everything, the Arizal, the Ramak, they're all commentaries on the Zohar. The Zohar are the teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and the world was not deserving of those teachings until the day of his death, when he revealed the great light of Kabbalah to the world. And that is why Lag BaOmer became Hilula D'Rashbi, because of the revelation of the Zohar. Now, it's very, very interesting that a number of modern historians, and some Rabbanim as well, some rabbis, have concluded that there actually is no authentic makor that he died on Lag BaOmer, and it basically came out from a printing mistake. The earliest writings of the Ari's Ksavim, by the way, that when I say Kisvei Ari, I hope you understand, these are not things the Arizal wrote. Virtually everything that's called Kisvei Ari are really written by Rav Chaim Vital, explaining the teachings of the Ari. The Arizal wrote very, very, very little. Kisvei Ari is essentially the Ksavim of Rav Chaim Vital, who is the Ari's Talmud. In the earliest printed editions, it describes Lag BaOmer as Yom Simchat Rashbi, the day of the joy of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. In later editions, there was a printing mistake, and the ches was dropped. So visualize this. If you have the word simchas and take out the ches, what you have is Yom Shemes, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. In other words, the whole idea that he died on Lag BaOmer, some have suggested, was the omission of a ches in the later printings of Kisvei Ari. But still, even if you're Gores, Yom Simchas Rashbi. So what was the Simcha? The Simcha was still the revelation of the Zohar. So the Simcha is going to be the same. Whether he died on Lag BaOmer or whether he didn't die on Lag BaOmer is a joyous day connected to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai because it was the day of great revelation. And other Sfarim bring that they don't find the printing mistake compelling. Rather, they say that even if you're Gairas, Yom Simchas, it's still the Yom Shemes, because that was the day that he revealed it. In other words, it doesn't change the Yarchei. But as I say, there is a bit of a question. As you know, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, together with his son, Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Shimon, are buried, of course, in Meron, which is right across the valley in Tzfas, right there. And on Lag BaOmer, hundreds of thousands of people come to Meron. 2 years ago, there was a very, very big tragic event, but again, Hashem should protect us, but people come back and people still go to Meron. And, well, what do they say about Meron? They say that every person should try to go to Meron once in their life, but not necessarily more. The crowds are very, very big. And it's interesting, if you go to Meron in the off-season, go to Meron today. You can have the whole kever to yourself. You can daven there. There'll be like 10 people there. You can spend hours, davening at the kever. And on Lag BaOmer itself, it is very, very crowded. And people are selling all sorts of stuff. People are selling refrigerators and whatever it is. It's a whole commercial thing. There's lack of tznius. I remember back in 1999, maybe earlier, my son was very young, and I was holding his hand. We were going to Meron, and literally the crowds are so powerful that I feel, you feel you're going to lose your child. Like literally, they're pressing against your arm. So I kind of had to relive my old football days, and I just rammed through them because I wasn't going to let my son's hand go. And sometimes you have to do that. So one has to be cognizant of this. But let's talk a little bit about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Like what is the uniqueness of his greatness? So here, if you remember Maseches Brachos, in the third parak, it says in Kriya Shema, "V'hayayim Shamaya." If you keep Hashem's mitzvahs, He will give you grain. V'yasafta deganecha, you will gather your grain. You will gather. You will harvest your grain. There's a machlokes, Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, how to interpret that pasuk. Rabbi Yishmael says, if the Torah says you will gather your grain, that means you're allowed to gather your grain. You have a heter called parnasa. That even though the Torah says you have to learn as much as you can, but the Torah permits you to make a living. V'yasafta deganecha. You gather your grain. This is the heter, so to speak, of Bittul Torah in order to support my family. Meaning it's not called Bittul Torah. That sounds logical. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai argues with that. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai says, gather your grain. He says, if a person is going to plow when it's time to plow, and plant when it's time to plant, and harvest when it's time to harvest, and thresh when it's time to thresh, how is he going to learn? It's a davar pashut, he says. There is no heter of parnasa. And when the Torah says, v'yasafta deganecha, it's talking about Ein Yisrael Eisen Ritzaynai Shel Makim. The Jewish people are not doing the will of God. So they're working, they're Isaac and Parnasa. But if they would do the will of God, He would take care of them. Their malacha would be done by other people, they'd win lotteries, whatever it would be. They wouldn't have to be Isaac and Parnasa. This is a very extreme view. According to Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, a true righteous Jew is not supposed to be involved in any type of hishtadlus of parnasa in olam hazeh. Now Tosfos asks the obvious question: how can he say that the pasuk v'yasafta deganecha is talking about where the Jewish people are not doing God's will? I mean, it's in Kriya Shema. It says v'hayayim shamoa. If you listen to me, I will give you reward. So you're telling me that's talking about people who are not doing Ritzono Shel Malko? So Tosos answers, Osin v'einamosim, meaning they're doing mitzvahs. They're doing mitzvahs. They're keeping Shabbos, they're keeping kosher, and God rewards them. But they're not living at the highest level. The highest level is you don't live in a world of physical hishtadlus. This is his opinion. Now, the Gemara goes on and says, Harbe Yasu, Rabbi Yishmael. Many people followed the path of Rabbi Yishmael, meaning they learned Torah, they were osek in Parnasa, they also be Adam, and Hashem blessed them with success. Harbe Yasu, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Many people said, I'll be like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. I'm not going to work. I'm not going to make a parnasa. God will take care of me. All I will do is learn. And the Gemara says, Lo yalsa biyadam. They were starving. Which means the Gemara indicates that the halacha normally follows the path of Rabbi Yishmael. By the way, that's not necessarily anti-Kallah. Sometimes people will make the argument to you, how could you be in Kallah if Rabbi Yishmael says you have to have a parnasa? Kallah could be parnasa too. In other words, Rabbi Yishmael's point is not work rather than learn. His point is you are mechuyev to develop some type of plan of hishtadlus to make money. That plan could include kollel, could include tutoring. See, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is very extreme. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is not simply arguing in favor of kollel. He's arguing, he says, I don't have kollel, I don't have salary, I don't have money, I don't have a job. I'm just going to learn. How are you going to live? He says, I don't know. Hashem will take care of me. You see, what I'm saying is people misportray the machlokas. They often portray the machlokas, Rabbi Yishmael and Rav Shimon bar Yochai, as kolel versus working. Now that is an important discussion, but that's another discussion. Lianias daiti, the machlokes Rabbi Yishmael and Rav Shimon bar Yochai is not kolel versus working. It's hishtadlus versus no hishtadlus. You have to realize how extreme Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's position is. He's not talking about a guy who arranges with a kollel to get 1,000 shekel a week or a month, and his wife is working, etc. That's hishtadlus. That's a parnasa like any parnasa. He's talking about the guy that has no plan whatsoever. And he says, God will take care of you. And on that, the Gemara says, that's not the way the world works. The people who follow Rabbi Yishmael's pathway are blessed with success. The people who follow Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai are not blessed with success. Now, the Gra, however, has a very interesting deal. You'll notice that the Gemara does not simply say halacha ka Rabbi Yishmael. It doesn't express it that, or ein halacha ka Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. It does not express it that way. Rather, it's just giving you a statement. Many followed Rabbi Yishmael, and they were successful. Many followed Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, they were not successful. So says the Gra, the word many means the average, the masses. For most people, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is not the right standard. But the Gra is medayik. In every generation, there are yechidim who are in such a high madrega that they can and are expected to live at the level of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. In other words, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's midah is not discarded. It remains for those who are on a very high level of ruchnius. So the big question that a person would ask himself is, am I a person that should be tofes the midah of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai? And what are the qualities? Now again, I want to emphasize, this has nothing to do with should I stay in Kallah for 2 years. That's a separate issue, because you could arrange his shtadlus there. But we're talking about a guy who has, he's not making it, but he simply says, I have emunah. So what's interesting is, in order to be on the madrega of Rav Shimon bar Yochai, it may not be enough that you like to learn. It really seems to be connected to the depth and level of your emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and your willingness to live a very, very Spartan life. Meaning, Rav Shimon bar Yochai is not guaranteeing you air conditioning and an SUV. He's not saying, have bitachon and you'll get 5-bedroom apartment with a car and air conditioning and the like. So if that's what you need, and again, I'm not even disparaging you. If that's what you need, then you have to go like Rabbi Yishmael, because you're not going to get it like Rav Shimon bar Yochai. But if you are a person who lives with bread and water, and you're happy to live with bread and water, when I say you, I include your wife, by the way. I don't just mean you. And both of you are happy to live that way. And you have emunah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of you. Then Hashem will come through. That's the midah of Rav Shimon bar Yochai. So it is a midah for yechidim. It is not a midah for most people. A person who simply says, I'm going to do the Rav Shimon bar Yochai and I'll get all this money in my bank account, that doesn't work. So for most people, we're supposed to be tofes the midah of Rabbi Yishmael. For Yechidei Skula, the Gra says, there is the midah of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai.
So do we say that Ishtadlut is We say for Yochai, for example, was his learning all day long his hishtadlut, or did he believe that you don't need hishtadlut at all? Did he say my learning all day is my hishtadlut, or did he say I don't need hishtadlut?
Well, in a sense, it was his hishtadlus because that was the source of the bracha. But he said you don't need any hishtadlus in the economic realm. Spiritual hishtadlus is all you need. You dive into Hashem and like, yeah.
Is perhaps this statement reflective of his experience of being in the cave?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Baruch Shekivanti is exactly what I was going to say right now. Yeah.
Is there a curse of Adam Arisha, which means we have to do hishtadlus and work?
Yeah, so he learned like this. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai apparently understands that even though there was a curse, that the general nature of things is that you need hishtadlus to get parnasa, but through the kayach of Torah, one could escape it. Torah kind of brings you back to Gan Eden. Now, as was just remarked, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's hashkafa may have come out of his own life. At some point, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Elazar, they had to go into hiding because they had said bad things about the Romans, and the Romans wanted to execute them. So they went into hiding in a cave for 12 years. And it mentions that for those 12 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu caused springs of water to be there for them to drink. Trees, fruit trees, sprouted up with fruit. So Shaila, why wasn't there an Isra of Orla? You're not allowed to eat the fruit for the first 3 years. Okay, there's no Shaila. If Orla applies to miraculous things. And the birds brought them meat. How did they know the hechsher? I don't know that either. But okay. So after 12 years, they had finally heard that those who wanted to destroy them had lost power or died. So they leave the cave. And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, it's Erev Shabbos. Well, no, actually, the first one is not Erev Shabbos. They leave the cave and they see a man who's working and harvesting. And once again, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai couldn't believe it. He says, how can people forsake Olam Haba to be osek in trivialities? And he said he looked at the person and the person burnt up. He became a pile of bones. Now, we don't understand this as he deliberately killed him. I mean, chas v'shalom, he wouldn't kill a person. But it just means that the Kedusha was so intense that the person was destroyed in that Kedusha. So what did Hashem say? Hashem said to him, go back into the cave. You're not ready for this world. They went back to the cave for another year. They then came out. It was Erev Shabbos. And they see a farmer carrying 2 bundles of hadassim, 2 bundles of myrtle. So once again, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is about to give him that stare. You know, you're working hard. And then he heard that the person said, my 2 bundles for Shabbos is one to honor Zohar, remember Shabbos, one Shamor and Zohar. So Rav Shimon Bar Yochai realized that even in the working world, you can use your economic activity for holiness. But essentially, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai's point is, hey, it worked for me. I was in a desolate area. I had no resources. Hashem gave me parnasa. It'll work for you. Problem is, as the Gemara says, what worked for him doesn't work for everybody else. Okay, so this is the Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, the Brisker Rav offers a gewaldige raya to the Graz Diuk. Remember, the Graz Diuk is that when the Gemara says, many did like Rabbi Yishmael, and they were matzliach. Many did like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, they were not matzliach. So what is the Graz Diuk? Many did like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, but there are yechidei skula who should follow the midah of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So the Brisker Rav brings a tremendous raya to the Gra. The Gra does not mention the raya, but tremendous raya. And this is from the last Mishnah in Kedushin. The very last Mishnah, which is a very long Mishnah, if you ever learned Kedushin, the last Mishnah brings a statement from Rabbi Meir, the Tana Rabbi Meir, Li'olam yalamed adam espenai. A parent is obligated to teach their child umnas, a profession, a job, nikia, that's clean, that means honest actually, an honest job, v'kallah, that's relatively easy, it shouldn't take up all of your time. You'd have time to learn, daven, etc. So Rabbi Meir seems to advocate parnasa is important. It's part of my chiyuv as a parent to either give my son training in a job or to pay for his education, whatever it would be. That's Rabbi Meir. Then later, the Mishnah brings Rabbi Nehurai. Rabbi Nehurai says, a job, what are you talking about? Meiniach ani kol umnas shabi'olam. I would throw away any type of job. Eini melamed espeni ela Torah. I would only teach my son Torah. I would not bother with anything else. Now, bepashtus, if I look at these two opinions, they seem to match up very well with Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Rabbi Meir, who says, I should teach my son a parnasa, that fits with Rabbi Yishmael, that a person should have a parnasa. Rabbi Nehurai, who says that I forget about umnus, Torah is the only thing that matters, that matches up with Rav Shimon bar Yochai. Right? So b'pashtus, the machlokas, Rav Meir and Rav Nehurai, is the machlokas, same machlokas, as Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Right? That's the pashut pshat. But frek the briskerov gaval the gakasha. The Gemara in Eruvin says Rav Nehurai and Rabbi Meir are the same person. Rabbi Meir has two names. And in fact, Nehurai is Aramaic for Meir. The word Meir is to illuminate in Hebrew. Meir. Nahora is light in Aramaic. So now you have a problem. Rabbi Meir says Parnasa. Rav Nehurai says Torah only. But it's the same person. Rabbi Meir is Rav Nehurai. So says the Brisker Rav, Mamish, Al Pi the Gra, it's a tremendous teretz. Look at the difference in wording between Rabbi Meir's statement and Rabbi Nehurai's statement. Rabbi Meir's statement is a general rule. Yolamed Adam Esbenai. Rav Nehurai is a personal statement. Eini Melamed Espeni Ela Torah. In other words, this is exactly the point. If you go with the Gra, that Rabbi Yishmael is the Hanhaga for the Rabbim, but there are Yechidei Skula who live like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, Rabbi Meir's second statement, which is Rav Nehurai, is Eini Melamed Espeni Ela Torah. My son, I know, is able to be on the Madrega of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And Mimela, that's Miyashav the Stira, that Rabbi Meir and Rav Nehurai is the same person. And he's explaining that for most people we should follow the Midah of Rabbi Yishmael, but there are Yechidim who can live on the Madrega of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. By the way, you can read the Mishnah. It's not clear if you read the Mishnah, Eini Melamed Espeni, I would teach only my son, Yochid, or Eini Melamed Esbanai, my sons. I wonder if these are the sons who died. Do you remember Rabbi Meir had a very, very wise wife, who's the daughter of Chanina ben Trajan, and Rabbi Meir's wife was the famous Talmidah Chachama Broria. And the Gemara says that once Rabbi Meir's children died on Shabbos, and she covered them up, and when Rabbi Meir came home, he asked, where are the children? We don't know how old they were. And Broria said to him, I have a shayla to ask you, that someone gave me 2 precious jewels to watch for a while, and then the owner came back and asked me to give it back to him. Do I have to give it back to him, or can I just keep him? So Rabbi Meir said, it's not your property. You have to give it back. You're a shomer. You have to give it back. So she said to Rabbi Meir, she took him upstairs. She showed him the bodies of their sons. And she said, these were the precious jewels that the owner gave us, and the owner wanted them back. And you yourself, Paskint, we have to give them back. So I'm just wondering if these are the sons that Rav Nerai is referring to when they were still alive. I would only teach my sons Torah, that these were very, very great, great people. And they were the ones who tragically died. We don't know. Are these other sons or the same sons or the like? So this is the overall story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So what do you see about Rashbi? What do you see about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai? You see an amazing madrega of a person who was so devoted to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who was so devoted to Torah, who was learning Yomam V'Layla, who had emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem actually gave them trees, gave them fruit, gave them water. And it represents the total madrega of not being osek in olam haba, olam hazeh, bichlal ubichlal. So, on Lag BaOmer, one of the things we think about is that even though we are not on that madrega, and even though for the most part we are going to take on the hanhaga of Rabbi Yishmael in one way or the other, but at least one day a year we think about that madrega, and we try to connect to it. We try to realize that ultimately everything comes from Hashem, and in theory, if not always in my practical life, the kayach of the Torah could bring down every conceivable bracha. So one aspect of Lag BaOmer is to contemplate, to meditate on the midah of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Doesn't it seem counterproductive that even the Rashbi, he held that you shouldn't work, so Kal V'chomer, he held that you shouldn't maybe be b'simcha, and then on his Yarchei, when we acknowledge what he held, nobody's learning, and we're all dancing.
No one's well, okay. Well, first of all, I mean, when you said shouldn't be b'simcha, I don't know if that follows. I mean, obviously, Torah learning should be the simcha. We say, Pekudei Hashem Yisharim b'samchei lev. Torah learning gives you simcha. That's why in Tisha B'Av you don't learn regular Torah. That's why in Avel doesn't learn Torah, right? Sometimes people ask the kasha, well, I don't enjoy learning. Can I learn Gemara on Tisha B'Av? We don't go with that, because Torah intrinsically is Mesamech Lev. But your point is still an interesting point. And that is, obviously, on Lag BaOmer, if you fully participate in the whole Meron business, there's going to be a lot of bittul Torah. Right, the hours of the trip, and even though you can learn on a bus, but it's not always so easy, and the like. And the question would be, should a Ben Torah participate in these types of things? So the emes is that Kama V'Kama Gedalim, although they were machshav Meron, in fact, the Brisker Rav, who was not a Kivrei Tzadikim person, when the Brisker Rav was sick, he asked Rav Shach to go to Meron to daven for him. So the kever of Meron is very, very makubal as a great makam of tefillah, even among the Litvishe Gedalim who were not big on visiting graves and everything else. So it's a chashav inyan, but on the other hand, I've heard Gedolim say that Dafka and Lag BaOmer, with all of the tumult and all of the crowds and the lack of tznius and the hours and hours and hours, remember, because of the roads itself, it takes extra hours to get to Meron that it would normally take. Normally it's 2.5 hours, it may be 6 hours sometimes, because of the traffic. So you're 100% correct. A person has to be careful. Eretz Yisrael is full of events. There's always events going on. In fact, when they run out of events, they invent a new yahrzeit that they want to keep. They'll find some person in Tanakh, so very obscure, and they'll say, oh, this is the yahrzeit, and they'll do a visit to the kever and the like. And you could spend your whole life going from chavaya to chavaya, event to event. Simchas Beis HaShoevos and Lag BaOmer Merons and Kivrei Tzadikim, and then when you finish Eretz Yisrael, you can take a trip to Uman or to Russia, see the Chavetz Chaim's kever. So you can spend your life going to different things, and even the Kotel itself, the Makam HaMikdash. But L'maisa, if you speak to Gedolim, you speak to Rabbi Yashav, Gedolim, or today Gedolim that are alive today, they tend to say that the most important thing you can do with your time is to be Isaac in Talmud Torah. Especially, this was Rav Shimon Bar Yochai's raison d'etre. Would he be that happy that you took off 10 hours to go to his kever? He might say, he might look at you and burn you up. He might say, who needs you to be here? Why aren't you in the base medrash and the like? So it is a good point. On the other hand, I'll give you a partial defense. And this is really not just for Meron. This is a partial defense about all the special events in Eretz Yisrael. And that is, it sometimes gives us chizuk, meaning if you find that after I go to Meron, I'm inspired and I come back to my learning with greater enthusiasm, greater passion, greater geschmack, then it's a worthwhile. In other words, it's worthwhile to take off something if it'll be mechazik you. See, so that's kind of the litmus test. Now, you don't always know ahead of time, but the litmus test is, if I go to these events and I just come back and exhausted and I can't learn for 3 days, and then I'm back to where I was before, that's all I've achieved is, after 3 days, I'm back to where I was before the trip, then overall, I would say the trip is not kedai. But if, on the other hand, a person feels a certain inspiration, then it is kedai. Because if you really said literally you can never take off learning for anything, then, you'd never go to simcha. You never do anything. And obviously, there is a spiritual benefit to a lot of those things that are ma'orer the leiv. So I don't want to take that away from people. But as I say, I think you have to ask yourself, what am I gaining from this? And if it's just having a good time, you have to, maybe you can do that locally. Just cross the street to Shimon HaTzadik for 15 minutes and come back. You don't have to spend, because Shimon HaTzadik is a big thing also. Why is that? It's a mud nezach. It seems to be a gezerah shava. Shimon, the minig of upsharing, which is also in the Talmidim of the Ari, that when a child is 3 years old, you cut his hair. So many people have the minig of doing it in Meron by Rav Shimon Bar Yochai's kever. Other people, on Lag BaOmer, other people do it at the kever of Shimon HaTzadik across the street. Now, what is the shaychus of Shimon HaTzadik to Lag BaOmer? I have no idea. It seems to be a Gzeira Shava. Oh, well, we know Shimon is connected to Lag BaOmer, so this Shimon is also connected to Lag BaOmer. I'm not aware of any shaychus at all, but still, you'll actually see thousands of people will be by Shimon HaTzadik on Sunday. And that could be a good Meron substitute in the sense, number one, Shimon HaTzadik was, of course, no Rav Kadosh, tremendously, but also in terms of Bittul Torah, it's just less. It's, you just cross the street and you can be there for an hour and then go back. So one has to be careful because otherwise you could spend your whole time in Eretz Yisrael. There's always like something to do, another tish, another thing, another event. Okay, but what are you, ultimately getting from all of the fun and games? I'm sounding like a Litvak today, but okay. All right, any questions? Yeah.
Why do people cut their hair on Lag BaOmer?
Yeah, so let's first talk about what's called upsharing, giluach, the first haircut. What was the minhag that kids didn't cut their hair, or their hair wasn't cut till they were 3? So it's connected to orla. We say that the first 3 years of a fruit, you can't really eat it, you can't really use it, but after 3 years, it's ready to be eaten. So too, a child for the first 3 years is not that capable of being educated, of absorbing a lot of Torah knowledge. Once they're 3, they're able now to learn, and the cutting of the hair is symbolic that they're no longer wild, right? Hair could be wild, but they could be structured, they could be directed, they could be guided. So that is the general idea of what's called an upsharing by the age of 3. Now the reason why it was connected to Lag BaOmer is once again that we want to connect it, since Rav Shimon Bar Yochai represents absolute commitment to Limud HaTorah. So when I inaugurate my child into Chinuch, I want him to be connected to the neshama of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now these are two different things, meaning you can have an upsharing without going to Meron, right? But many connect the upsharing with visiting Rav Shimon Bar Yochai's kever, and therefore they will do it either the Lag BaOmer before the 3rd birthday, or the Lag BaOmer after the 3rd birthday. Those are two different minhagim within that hanhaga. Yeah.
Sharons, are they only performed by Hasidim?
Okay, so this is interesting. So the minhag of taglachas was brought down with the Talmidim of the Arizal, and for most of the time it was done mainly by Hasidim. In recent years, it has been adopted by many Ashkenazim. So in Eretz Yisrael in particular, the average avrech in Mir or whatever it is will do an upsharon, although it had not been a common minhag among not misnagdim in Europe. But it's become one of those things that people like to do. Okay, have a good day.
Thank you for listening to this Samayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.